All right, so we're just going to test your mic levels.
Thank you. Thank you. How's that? Is it
Fine.
good? Everything good?
Just say and spell your name for me.
My name is Chris Melisinos, and that's ChrisMelisinos.
Melisson.
Inos. Issinos.
Sorry for just butchering this.
You were certainly not the first, and you won't be the last.
Okay, cool. And so, what do you call yourself in terms of this exhibition? The curator? Or?
So I'm actually the guest curator, and this exhibition was originally formed and created for the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. So I'm the guest curator for the art of video games.
What does that mean, guest curator?
Well, it means that I'm not officially on staff at the Smithsonian. Right, I'm an external entity to the museum. But I had the opportunity to meet with the museum at an event, and we kind of started this discussion about video games as an art form, and they reached back out to me to have a further conversation. And what was supposed to be an initial 30-minute meeting turned into a 3-hour meeting. And said, wow, there's so much more to these video games. Help us figure out what they actually mean. And it was from those chance meetings and those encounters that we were able to convince the museum that this is a medium worthy of the title art, worthy of examination as an art form, and convinced them to do it. And 3 years later, we launched in Washington.
Wow, awesome. Do you have, what's your day job?
What's my day job? So today, I'm the director. I'm a director in corporate strategy at Verizon, and I focus on next generation entertainment and media and these sorts of things. Prior to my time at Verizon, the position that I had where I'd spent most of my time in the games industry was with Sun Microsystems, and I was the chief gaming officer at Sun Microsystems, and held that position for about 12 years. And built video game technology, mobile technology, server technology, web-based tech, and all these things. So I've been around the games industry, or working within it for a long time, but I've been a gamer and a programmer my entire life, right? So, yeah.
Cool. And where are you based? Where were you based for Sun Micro?
Well, I'm no longer with Sun Microsystems, right? But at the time, I was based in Northern Virginia, which is where I live, and I had teams in California and Boston, and overseas. So I always worked remotely, and in an interconnected age, it makes it a whole lot easier to do that, right? So yeah.
What did you work on specific games?
So the work that I wound up doing within the games industry was not on any specific game, but it was on enabling technologies. So being at Sun, we worked on Java technologies. So Java on mobile phones and high-performance Java technologies for web-based games and these sorts of things. But early on in my career, my focus on video games while at Sun, I established a community called javagaming.org, which is still alive today, and it's the largest web form for Java-based game development in the world. In fact, one of the early members is a gentleman by the name of Notch, or Marcus, who created Minecraft, which was built entirely in Java. So we'd like to say, there was this nice road of Java technologies being nascent and then making their way into some pretty large titles.
Absolutely. So why don't you talk to me about how the concept got started for this exhibition?
Sure. So back when I met with Elizabeth Bruin, who's the head of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and Georgina Goodlander, who was my counterpart at the museum, and the colleague that I worked most closely with, and with whom without this exhibition couldn't have happened. She was just an amazing collaborator, and it has been an extraordinary experience working with her. We came in and had this conversation about video games as an art form, looking at the way the world is changing in terms of how we view content and material and connection. The internet, through its the democratization of its technology, through the broad spread and adoption of the technology, it's just changed globally every type of conversation we can possibly have, including an artistic one. And so we've kind of come to the age where we're able to look back 40 years and say, maybe what we were engaging in all along was art. In fact, those of us who were kids growing up in the 1970s and 80s knew this to be one of the most, if not the most, impactful form of expression. We were just kids, though. We couldn't articulate exactly why it was so important. So we started having these discussions, and the problem with me is I'm so passionate about video games that you give me a little room to move, right, and I'm going to try to take over the entire room with it. So I was, coming with all these different ideas about, movement systems and glyph systems in the museum, and they were like, whoa, this is great, but how do we scale this down, and what's the first step forward? And I said, well, really the first step forward is to understand that video games are not, when you're looking at art, it's not about the art within video games, but video games as an art form. So by example, right, when you look at a video game, within them you can find illustration and sculpture and orchestration and narrative. And any one of those things we would pull out, put on a pedestal, hang on a wall, print in a book, and we'd hold them up as art or as a meaningful art within society. But in video games, they all come together to create something that transcends any one piece. It becomes something greater than the art within it. And I believe it's the only form of art we have that does this, right? Television can't do it, movies can't, books can't. So within the video game, we have this transcendence of a new art form that is made up of what we consider to be traditional art. And this was something that resonated very strongly with the mission and the ideas of the Smithsonian. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I do not speak on behalf of the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Okay, so these are not their statements, these are my comments, okay? And they loved the idea. I said, okay, well, let's go and figure out how to build this forward. And we did, and we spent some months, kind of teaching and educating and getting people to understand this perspective. And it wasn't long after that that we were given the green light, and off we went. And 3 years later, we opened in March of 2012, and the rest is history.
Okay, so my next question is two parts, and we can do them separately if you want. But
and cut me off, you need to. Okay.
No, feel free. Could you just briefly describe for me the concept of firstly, how do we choose which video games we were going to showcase, and then secondly, the displaying of it, because it's displayed in a way you would never go to like in an art gallery and it's like like I'm at an arcade.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that was completely intentional. The two designers that worked on this show, David Gleason and Michael Mansfield, were brilliant. Again, I was really fortunate enough to have these tremendously intelligent and thoughtful collaborators at the museum. Otherwise, this would never have come together in this way. And so, all right, how did we choose the games? In order to be able to really describe a 40-year trajectory of video games, right? I mean, we could have put together something that would take you years to go through. Okay, right? We know how long it takes to play some of these games, 80, 90, 100-hour-long games, and all these sorts of things. But we had to be efficient and economical in terms of our time and what we did. So we did a few things. First, we started with this premise of the three voices in video games, and this kind of serves as the basis of the thesis for the show. In video games, we have three distinct voices, right? We have the voice of a creator, an author, somebody who wants to tell you something. Hideo Kojima has a certain way that he describes his view of war versus diplomacy within the Metal Gear series of games, right? So they have something they want to say. The second voice is the voice of the game itself. It is literally the mechanical voice. It is how you are to play with it and how do you control it and what are the rules that bind you to that environment. But the third is the player. Right? And it's through these small interactions, these kind of micro decisions that we get to make as the player, that we personalize that art for ourselves. So we started with this premise of three voices and said, okay, if we're going to hold true to a three-voice premise, this cannot be an exhibition of Chris's, 80 favorite games in over 40 years. So rather than select 80 games, okay, 4 games for each of these 20 machines that you'll experience in the exhibition, instead we went and selected 240 games. And we opened up the vote to the public and said, for each platform, in each genre, you can choose one of these 3 titles that fit that genre. What we experienced was not entirely unexpected for me, but was entirely unexpected, I believe, for the museum. The amount of people that voted was staggering. We amassed 2.7 million votes from 175 countries in just over a month, right? With no press, no nothing, just opening this to the community in the world. And so it demonstrated this massive, I think, pent-up desire to see video games examined this way. And so in a small way, we were able to represent the voice of the people who love video games as much as I do. So those are the 80 that we picked. Now, the 5 that were picked were not open for discussion or debate from the public. They were picked by me, and the reason that they were picked by me was I chose 5 games that, for each one of them, represented something distinctive within their era, either in the way they changed the perception of video games by the public, or changed the perception of what video games could be for designers, or both. So, for example, in the exhibition, we have 5 playable games. We have Pac-Man, Super Mario Brothers, The Secret of Monkey Island, Myst, and Flower. Each one of them, again, changed the way designers looked at their craft and the way public thought about video games. So look at a game like Pac-Man. Pac-Man, when it was released in the early 1980s, all of a sudden it comes into an arcade where most of the games are about what? Annihilation, xenophobia, aliens descending to destroy things, military theme. So along comes this candy-colored, brightly animated, loud game with these funny characters on it. Now you have women coming into arcades. Now you have children being able to compete against adults because they're on equal footing. So it changed the entire culture of that space. And what we saw was this massive outgrowth of trying to understand what this meant. We had a top 40 song, Pac-Man Fever. We had T-shirts and cereal and cartoons and clothing and Bic lighters, and everything was adorned with Pac-Man. And what you were witnessing was the formation of culture, right? This was something new that our popular culture was trying to understand, right? To appropriate, and how far could that go? And so Pac-Man changed the way arcade games were made. And so we have one for each of those eras, and those are the 5. And then the last bit of materials that we have, and I shouldn't say the last bit because in some ways they're among the most important materials, is we have a collection of interviews with some of the most recognizable and accomplished game designers in American culture and the world. People like Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari, all the way to Ken Levine, who did the BioShock series of games, Kelly Santiago and Robin Hunicke and Tim Schafer, and just this cavalcade of amazing, amazing talent, talking about what inspires them, why they choose video games as the medium through which to tell their stories. And it's astonishing, it's stunning to hear their answers. And it was a privilege, knowing most of them personally, it was a privilege to have been able to include them in this exhibition. So there's a bunch of stuff.
That sounds so cool. Wow. That was awesome. If there's anything else you want to say.
Sure. So there is a book that accompanies the exhibition as kind of the catalog, and it was written by myself and a very close friend of mine, Patrick O'Rourke, which is a privilege to work. You get to work on a project with your best friend. It's pretty awesome. And so that's actually available, at the bookstore and on Amazon and all that stuff. But what we were able to do in the book that we couldn't do in an art exhibition was to really dive deeper into what the games meant, right? In these video snippets that you see, 60 to 90 seconds, I can't fully articulate the struggle designers had on the Sega Saturn of creating a Panzer Dragoon game, of having to move from 2-dimensional to 3D art. I only have 60 seconds to tell you 1 or 2 snippets, but in the book, we're able to elaborate and go much and basically speak much more deeply about those things. So we have the companion piece there, and again, without my colleagues Georgina Goodlander, Michael Mansfield, David Gleason, support by Betsy Bruin and the staff at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. This would never have come together, so I'm eternally grateful to them as well for this.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
No
again.
problem. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was perfect.
And